Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. In this episode, we speak with Alberto, Beto Vasquez. We talk about his involvement with TRIO and the Early Academic Outreach Program EAOP efforts through UCSD. He shares his path at a personal level, how he navigated pursuing higher education, which ultimately led to his doctoral degree focusing in education. He holds his bachelor's in biology, which has allowed him to bring culture, art, and STEM all together via EAOP efforts. Let's get started with the conversation. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Today we have Alberto, Beto Vasquez, who is currently the director at UCSD's Early Academic Outreach Program, EAOP, and also the CSSI STEM Outreach Program. He has a bachelor's and master's of science focused in biology, biological sciences from the University of California at San Diego, as well as a doctoral degree in educational leadership with a focus on community colleges from SDSU. He has been a strong and passionate STEM advocate to our community. As the new director of EAOP at UCSD, he leads various events, such as Comienza con un Sueño, a UCSD effort to empower the middle and the high school students within our San Diego region. Welcome, Beto Vasquez, to Success Innovation. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Buenos dias, Lázaro, and good morning to all, or good afternoon to all, depending on when you're watching this.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. So I gave a brief introduction about who you are, your titles, your credentials, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything else that you want to add that maybe I didn't really include?
Yeah, no, I would say the only thing is how I identify, right? So I would say, as a father, as a husband, el hijo de dos papás que sacrificaron mucho para poder tener las oportunidades que tengo. Definitely, being the son of parents who have made sacrifices so that I could be able to have the privileges that I have nowadays. Community member, community activist, community leader. I'd say those are definitely integral parts of who I am. That kind of work to complement, my professional titles and professional work is equally, met with that community fervor and passion.
Awesome. Thank you. It's great. A great addition there. Sticking with, being involved and having that community in mind, we will definitely start off touching on the community, but part of that also leads me to the main core values, and everybody has core values. So I want to ask if you have maybe a couple core values, 2 or 3 that you want to share, and how do those core values actually influence you, and how did you determine and actually became aware of those core values?
Well, you know what, Lázaro, I just thought about it right now where you gave me the question, to be quite honest. And I think it's a good question, right? Because I think for many of us, folks that are kind of navigating, whether we knew or just kind of went through, through education and kind of moving up the professional ranks, these are questions that we should be asking ourselves, right? And so, I'd say, at this point in time, some of the things that I would highlight is, moving or operating with authenticity, being genuine, and being intentional about what I do. And so, when I think about the purpose, and the work that I like to carry out, I take a lot of pride in being able to have the same conversation and showing up as the same person that I am for you right now, as if I met with the chancellor from my institution, or if I met with an old friend that I grew up with, right? They get the same person. And I think for me, that's meant a lot. And it wasn't always like that, right? But for me, it's meant a lot to be able to speak with parents at maybe one of the sites or the schools that I work with, and put them at ease, right? And kind of reassure them, and be able to communicate things to them that we can build trust, right? Based on that genuineness, on that authenticity, and then have a conversation that leads to being very strategic or intentional about, what they would like for their kids, or speaking to the students themselves, right? Kind of having an honest conversation. The tricky part, I would say, is that now I feel like that, right? But that wasn't the case, when I was, finishing up college or when I was in college, when I was figuring out what I wanted to do. And so, during those points, I would say there was a big learning curve in trying to figure out um, how can I honor who I show up as and embrace the person that I wanted to become, right? And I think for a large part of the time, it was kind of a pulling of back and forth of I need to give up this version of Beto that I've been all my life so that I can be this other version, this professional version, the scientist version. And that's not necessarily the case, right? It's I tell people we're like diamonds. Like diamonds have different facets that contribute to its worth. So we are as well, right? So we have different facets as an older sibling, as a son or a daughter, as an employee, as a partner, whatever it is, roles that you have, they equally contribute to the value that you bring to any environment that you're in. So all that to say, it can change over time. At this point in time, for me, it's genuineness, authenticity, and intentionality. And I say, having to be aware kind of throughout that process and being honest with yourself, I think, is definitely one of those virtues that you always want to keep is just be honest with yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. So being authentic, being genuine, honest, and intentional, those are
Absolutely.
really good core values and really essentially is what, it took you years from what you're saying to really come to that awareness. And I mean, it's innate. We have them, but that's why the question is brought up. So that way, some of the individuals in the audience might say, "Hey, I never really sat down and thought about what my core values are." But you do have them inside of you. Once again, they're
Absolutely.
innate, and you just have to verbalize them and put them, in writing, and make sure that you are aware of what those are and work with them, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
and I would the last thing I would add is that's why it was even honest, right? About hey, I never think about that, but I think oftentimes when you have folks that have made it per se into some kind of a profession that they wanted to get into, there's oftentimes that misleading notion that these folks have it all figured out, right? And the
right.
truth is, whether it's a professor at the university or engineer or a scientist that you're speaking to, we're figuring things out as we go, right? And so we don't have it all figured out. And I just want to give space to that too, because if let's say one of the folks in your audience is struggling with oh, I don't have it all figured out, I don't know what these things are, I've never asked myself this. I just want to normalize that for you, right? That it's okay if you haven't asked that, and that's the importance and the value that you bring with conversations like this is make normalizing that type of questioning and line of thought, so that folks can feel like a deep breath, right? Of okay, cool. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be the polished version all the time, but it's okay to embrace that I don't have it all figured out.
Exactly. And now we're gonna go back in retrospect to now your path, you've slowly figured it out. Maybe it wasn't well laid out, but you're just walking through the motions to some extent. And I want the audience to hear from Beto Vasquez, how you actually started into being involved in the community, right? And we're gonna go back to the phase where you actually started working as a community fellow for the city of San Diego. How did you begin that path, and what did that do for you in retrospect, a couple years now, reflecting back? What does that look like now?
Yeah, so it's everything happened by accident, but on purpose, right? There was this divine plan that I had no no idea of, and I still don't, right? Like I don't know how exactly things are supposed to happen all the time, but I lend myself, me presto, right? And I think that's always been key for me. I've never waited to have a specific title to take agency and address things. And I think that's one thing that's always kind of stood out when I've met folks. And so when I say by accident, I never intended to work in City Hall. I never intended, to go into the sciences, to be quite honest with you. But along the way, I was just attentive to uh, what I was liking and what I didn't like so much, or where I found my voice and where I didn't feel that my voice was really present. And so, when I talk about working, being asked or invited to work at City Hall, I had when I was in community college. I'll go back to community college where I started, right? Because I'm a proud community college alum. And so when I started community college, which by the way had changed my life drastically, taught me so many things about myself, and gave me the space to kind of learn about my interest. I started getting involved with my community in Barrio Logan, and I wanted to give back. I had grew up in this neighborhood, wasn't always the ideal citizen, in my community, and so I felt a sense of you know, of giving back. And so that's what I did. I would coordinate as a student leader that I started to become in community college. I started to coordinate beautification projects, I call them, where we brought together not only college students but folks that were in recovery from drugs and alcohol, and we created these beautification projects in conjunction with the local municipalities, with some local businesses that were donating stuff, local NGOs or not, non-government organizations, and we would go around and clean up. Well, we coordinate this day where we bring out volunteers. They got service hours. They got this, that, and the other, and we went around just helping neighbors out, cleaning up the streets. And at one point, it got the attention of somebody that was one of the elected officials in local government in the council member position during that time. And that individual, David Alvarez, was helpful really in opening up a lot of opportunities and opening my eyes along the way, because I had definitely had limitations about the things I'd be able to accomplish with my life. And so being invited to support within the elected's office and learn new things and kind of give space to my voice. I also learned that we all have very important information that we can share, right? We oftentimes come from communities that might be under resourced. We might come from a background where people just don't get it. It seems like the people, the electeds are not always, or those that are in charge are not always kind of interested in the details, the nuance, and that's what it feels like sometimes. And so being provided the opportunity to leverage that voice and say, hey, you know what, have we considered this, or have we talked about this, or can we do this? That really lent itself to a lot of growth in learning how things operate right within local government. So it went from taking agency even when I didn't have a title that would give me permission to do that, to addressing issues in the community, and then finding a way to give that voice in a way that really had some foundation to it, if you will, right? We learned the process, learned the proper channels, and learned that you had interchangeable skill sets, right? Everything that I learned, and decía mi mamá eras en burro, right? When I was younger, and I had a hard time learning certain things, but I was adamant about it. I learned that skill set was transferable to these new places, but we called it persistence, Lázaro, right? We called it persistence. So lo burro era bueno, pero en ciertos aspectos, right? If you apply it well, you can definitely use it for good skill. And so I've learned to utilize many of the skill sets that at one point maybe had negative connotations to them in a positive light that would be helpful in addressing needs that we might have in our communities.
Awesome. I'm just going to make a little parenthesis here because you reminded me of a book called Burro Genius. Burro Genius by Villaseñor. I forgot his first name, but the author is
Victor.
Villaseñor. Victor Villaseñor. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Rain of Gold, right?
he also wrote Reign of Gold, which is a story about immigrant family coming over to the U.S. But Burro Genius is a story about, it's kind of like a biopic, which is a story about himself and coming of age to some extent. So it's a really fast, easy read, but it's very entertaining, and it talks about, the path of era bien burro, but to some extent he was street smart, right?
Yeah.
So those smarts, as you indicate, if you apply them well, really help and benefit you. So I'm gonna put a parenthesis here, and we're gonna go a little further back in your story. And before you started being an awesome, more of a holistic activist individual, there's a little bit of a dark period in your life. Can you walk us through that? You mentioned Barrio Logan. For those of you who are listening, Barrio Logan here in San Diego, let's go back to the 80s, early 90s. That's when you probably grew up in that area. It was very chaotic, all right? It was very gang. Uh, Members were prevalent. I grew up in that area myself as well. Went to Logan Middle School, went to Sherman Elementary, Logan Elementary and Sherman Elementary. So I grew up in that area. I know exactly what you're talking about. And David Alvarez is also from that area. So the
Right.
three of us can definitely relate and can definitely attest to how it was and what it is. So I remember seeing my peers as we were growing up and coming of age when you start hitting those teenage years. A lot of them started getting into trouble. And all of a sudden, you go to juvie, you spend a couple of years there, you come back out, you maybe can't really cope and adapt. There's really no guidance, no structure that helps and supports you, and you fall back into that system. So I think, interestingly enough, something like that happened to you. I don't really want to dive into a lot of the details, but you can definitely tell us how and what happened to some extent and what took place in order for you to open your eyes and say, this is not the path that I want to follow for the rest of my life. This will help others possibly listen and hear how to avoid falling into this dark pit.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I think I'll touch on that briefly. And again, just to kind of echo what you said, I think just to show that it doesn't matter where you start, but where you finish, right? I think not everybody grew up in the same environment, right? Where gangs were so omnipresent, where there was drug usage. Maybe they did have both parents at home. Maybe the socioeconomic status was okay, right? So there, that in those forms, everything was good. But it could be that potentially, maybe the pressure is on, right? To that you have to be like fulano de tal, or the expectation that you're not as good as somebody else, right? And we can talk about, even though there might be different environments, really the impact on us as people is similar, right? We start to doubt ourselves. We start to negate whether we have something good to offer the world, our abilities. We start, believing when people call us, tontos or burros, right, or all these different things. And I say that smilingly, right, because a lot of that is cultural. Some of that is learned. Some of that is passed down generation to generation. I had a conversation with my buddy this morning about how our parents can only love mirroring the way they were loved, right? And so if you have, parents that grew up in poverty, or with parents that were not too personal, they might have not heard those nurturing words, and it then starts to kind of cascade into the different generations, right, as we go. I say all that because for me growing up, it was, yeah, my environment was a large part of it, but much of it was the dynamics in my household, right? It was my mom and my biological dad had separated. He was an abusive alcoholic. My mom worked all day long to provide for four kids. So that meant that oftentimes we were kind of on our own. We were latchkey kids, as they called us back then, right? And so we got ourselves to school, we got ourselves home, we made our own meals. Mom was always at work. For me, what really hit, now looking back, I'm able to be honest with myself. much of that was I just wanted attention, right? And so, I would get recognitions at school for being a good student. I'd see everybody else's parents show up. My mom would never be able to be there. And so that started impacting me like I wasn't important enough. I didn't matter. Nobody cared, so why should I care? And so that kind of translated over into a lot of the behaviors that I started to adopt. And so naturally, that kind of, picture myself kind of dealing with all that, plus 10 other kids with similar situations. We didn't know how to process all that emotional baggage, all those challenges. And so naturally, we all started making, stupid choices that ended up, getting us in trouble. That started to become more normal. So then, not surprisingly, we went from, going to juvenile hall to continuing these dumb behaviors that ended up, us being as adults in county jails and so on and so forth, and finding other people that we connected with and bonded with that weren't necessarily the best company all the time. They were good people, don't get me wrong. Many of the folks that I've met, both in and outside of prison, have been great, right? Very bright people with good hearts, but hardships, right? Hardships that they had to make decisions. And sometimes it wasn't the best decisions to make. So now it's important for me to also share that message, right, with folks before it gets that far. I mean, I've met college students that I've shared my story with early on that didn't resonate with them before, but then as college students, they decided to make bad choices and then found themselves in the legal system. So, it's something that's definitely omnipresent, right? The carceral system here in the United States is something fierce, right? We have more people in prison than some countries have people in their general population, and so it's something that impacts all of us, right? I think the statistic is one in every three people have some kind of connection to the carceral system, whether it's directly or indirectly. Somebody or yourself were arrested or pulled over for a DUI or whatever it may be. It's something that everybody's connected in some way or another.
Yeah. So when you actually rectified or changed your course, how did that happen? And why did you decide to pursue college and education and ultimately become a doctor with a doctoral degree in education?
Well, Lázaro, I'd say that I think what ended up kind of just being enough was after going in and out of prison and spending most of my 20s in the California state prison system. I had seen it came to a point where I had seen guys that were older than me that were kind of missing out on life events. They were missing out on funerals for loved ones. They were missing out on weddings for their kids, on the births of some of their grandchildren. And I thought to myself, surely this is not where I want to be later on. This is not what I deserve for myself. And that was kind of a hard thought, right? Because up to now, I had never really pictured or expected much from myself, right? I think for a long time, all I wanted was to have like a good job, and I've said that a few times because the reality is that for many of the folks that are returning home, we just want to be okay, and San Diego's an expensive place to live, right? And getting a job is hard. Getting a job with a criminal record is even harder. And so, so you just wanted something, that was normal per se. And so kind of going through all that, thinking about that, you know, I realized that planning, if I didn't plan, I plan to fail, right? And I think people have heard that before, and that's definitely the case. So earlier on, I started kind of being very intentional and strategic about what I was going to do differently when I got back home this time. In the past, I had got out, I got, labor type jobs at the shipyard or, as a mechanic. I've always been pretty good with my hands. And so that's what I did. But what ended up happening is that I would just work hard, work extra overtime, keep myself busy, and then there came a point where I would be thinking like, oh, I deserve a night out, or I deserve to, have a beer or whatever. It took me a while to learn that I have a very addictive personality, and that's why I don't even drink now, right? And that was hard to kind of figure out about myself. It took me a few times. But this last time I thought, what am I going to do different, right? I can't just go get, that type of job, follow that routine, because that's kind of what would happen with me. Not to speak for anybody else, but for me, that's kind of what the situation was. So I figured I'd try something different. I had a friend at the time that was a student at UCLA, and we would write, and she was really instrumental in helping me, get ready to go to college when I got out. And so, I had, by the time I paroled, I had my financial aid stuff kind of ready. My college application was submitted, so I was ready to go when I got out. And then I found myself going through a program that would allow me to live there when I got out, which was another big issue, housing. And so if I completed that program within 6 months, there was a special something, some kind of assembly bill that was going on, that if I completed that successfully, then I would be off parole, which is another big challenge for folks. That keeps that recidivism pretty high. So I was like, great place to live. I can go to for free, right? They're going to pay for me. If I finish this, I'm off parole, and I'll be able to start going to college. I was like, great. So that's what I did. I made a plan when I got out, and I went to college. I'll be honest with you. I went to college for three main reasons, right? I went to get paid. I heard I can get financial aid. I was a lot more handsome and younger back then, so I said I'm gonna meet some girls, and I was gonna stay out of trouble, and I had to be really honest with myself about what my situation was and how I was gonna go about it, right? And I had to know that if I didn't find something good to do, I'd find something else to do that was probably not going to be productive. And so I did that program. I went through it. I started school, didn't know how to send an email, didn't know how to start a computer. The internet had just kind of began, a couple of years before. And so it was a pretty wild ride, man. And I remember sitting in class and the teacher saying, "Oh, save this on a thumb drive." We had thumb drives back then. Save this on a thumb drive and submit it to me. And I'd go to the library, and for the love of God, I couldn't figure out how to send an email or save things on this flash drive. So it was a real learning curve for me, right? Thankfully, I was able to figure it out. I've been pretty good at asking for help when I need help. I think that's an important thing. And so that's managed to open up a lot of opportunities for me, is asking questions. How I came to biology was because when I was the last time I was incarcerated, I was a wildland firefighter. So if for those of you who don't know, wildland firefighting used to pay you a whole $1 to basically be on the front lines for wildland firefighting in the state of California. So all those guys in orange all the time, when you see it on the news, when there's big fires, those are all guys that are coming from prison camps. So I was in a camp, and there was an opportunity to learn about water treatment. And so I got really good with the water treatment piece. I ended up doing my state certification while I was incarcerated. I got 100% on my state exam, meaning I got everything right. And there was a lot of math involved with that. I was never great at math, but I had a lot of time to study. So we managed to make it work. But I got out and I couldn't get a job in that field, even though I had 100% on my state certification. So I figured while I was going to school, I would take biology courses to beef up my certification. And at some point, I thought I should be eligible to get myself a job in water treatment. And so that's how I kind of came across the whole biology background piece of it.
Then all of a sudden, fast forward a little bit, you start working and you start doing outreach for the students, for the kids in Barrio Logan and all over San Diego County to empower and encourage, motivate the students. How did that begin? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it also happened by accident, right? I ended up getting a job on campus at San Diego City College, my alma mater, and I got a job in the outreach department. So it was basically just helping folks, that were willing to take a chance on themselves, and just putting them at ease and navigating the process with them. And I loved it. I loved the job of being able to help somebody who is coming in so doubtful, is willing, is being courageous enough to kind of step onto the campus and want to do something and help them out. And so I did that for some time while I continued to go to school. I think one of the defining moments of how I came to do more of the science outreach stuff stems from, no pun intended with the stem, right? But it stems from my first experience going into a summer research program. So when you're in the sciences as an undergrad, whether it's a 2 year or a 4 year institution, you have access to a lot of paid summer research experiences that oftentimes people don't take advantage of, especially in community college. Because in community college, we think, oh, I'm just a community college student. I'm not as smart as the 4 year students or this or that. We put up so many different excuses for ourselves. But I took a chance. I applied, not knowing whether or not I was going to be able to get it. By the grace of God, I ended up being offered an opportunity for my first summer research experience, and I'm contacted by the person. She says, "Hey, congratulations! You know, I had to fight for you. You reminded me of my brother," and that really resonated with me because here was a person that I had made a personal connection with by sharing, parts of my story that I think when we share our story in personal statements or what have you, rather than look at it like it's like something negative, people you can show it as a form of resilience, a form of strength, right? That even regardless of these things, I have managed to persist, right? And I am here, and I want this, and I have a direction. And I think she saw that. The funny part was when she said, "Here's a list of topics in biology that you have to choose from to go to a lab." And for the life of me, I didn't know what half of these things were. I didn't know what any of these things were. And so I started, I inferred to the infinite wisdom of Google, right? And I started searching up all these palabrotas, and I still didn't know what they were. So the next best thing that I did to get into one of these labs was I looked at all the pictures of the people in the labs, right? I used the internet for that, and I looked for the lab that looked the happiest.
Okay.
I know that's so silly, but I figured if I can find a lab where the people are actually smiling, that's where I probably want to be at, and that's kind of what led into going into that space and learning about myself, being comfortable as a scientist, and I also learned about the need for us to be out there and show ourselves so that people can see what they can be, right? And so one of my long-term goals while I was going through my education was I wanted to be a professor of biology because I never had one that looked like me. And so I wanted to become that for students. And I've had the opportunity to do that since then. But then I also learned that there's so many other things that I could be doing that I think I might be more instrumental in. And so that's kind of the outreach STEM component came out of a combination of of need to show what people can be, a need to start educating people at younger ages because by the time our youth get to high school, they're so impacted by these social components of life, right? And figuring out who they are as individuals. They start getting slammed with all these classes and requirements. And, depending on where you're at and what type of support you have, you're bombarded with all these expectations that a lot of people have. So I figured if we start making science fun, educational, interactive, cultural, right? We start getting people a little bit more engaged and excited about science rather than being apprehensive or thinking I'm not what a scientist looks like, I'm not what an engineer looks like. And so that kind of, having the experience that I've had, having the access to resources that I've had along the way, in my ability and my willingness to work with my community to meet these needs, that outreach component just kind of started building up, and it's looked very different over the years. But it's built up to something that really brings together science, art, and culture in a way that accepts failure too, right? I tell my students all the time, my number one rule here is that we're going to fail, and that's okay. That's science, right? We do science, we do research on something for years and years and years. It doesn't work, it doesn't work, doesn't work. So finally we get a breakthrough. So that's, having changing that perception of you have to have it perfectly all the time. I think it's one of the first steps. And so we've been able to do that by working, through K-12 and also, for undergrads and graduate students that we've gotten the chance to work with.
Awesome. Can you explain? I know that you do something really fun with your outreach experiments, and I think it catches a lot of the authenticity, representation, and intentionality of teaching and hooking young students into the sciences with your outreach experiment. Can you physically tell us what you do that is different?
Yeah, sure. So one, I like to say that my approach is always one that deconstructs science, right? So I like to take natural phenomena that that people see around them, whether it's the plants right outside your house to making chocomil at home, and explain, hey, this is all science, man. You think you're just making chocomil, but you're making homogeneous solutions, right? Like you're doing chemistry. Estás guisando un huevo, it's chemistry, right? We're changing the matter and what it's looking like, and we're using heat and all these different things. So it's really kind of deconstructing things that people are familiarized with and just breaking it down and saying, "Ooh, there's science in all that," right? I think the lesson that you're probably talking about is our science of tortillas lesson that's gained a lot of traction. It's one of the original lessons that we developed earlier on. It's a lesson that it's kind of been comprised of different things, predominantly a trip that my compadre and I had taken, and he's asking me, hey, ¿cómo es de que la tortilla se infla, right? Y se separa. And so when he asked me, hey, why does the tortilla do that, right? Why does it inflate the way that it does? And it's so even in the two layers. And I thought it was the silliest questions, right? But I think that's where science kind of thrives, right? Was that's on the cocktail napkins and in these conversations in an airplane or in a car or wherever. And surely that's kind of what sparked this whole different lesson, right? And so it was really great because the science of tortillas lesson is really an opportunity for us to embrace science, art, and culture, and give space to our ancestors, right? And all the greatness that we learned from past generations that we never credit them as scientists or engineers, and I think the science of tortillas really highlights, I like to say it highlights the biology, chemistry, and physics, because the biology process of it is, looking at how organisms evolve. We're looking at artificial selection, right? How these folks, these indigenous groups in Mexico, our ancestors, right, had found a way. They were tired of working so hard por poquito, right? The little bit of yield, and said, surely there's got to be a better. I imagine this. This is that's how it went down. They're like, no, estamos trabajando todo el día y nomás es poco. And so at some point, somebody said, you know what? We're going to plant el teocinte más gordito y de ese el más gordito de allí y ese el más gordito de allí. And then the yield started to increase because they were planting the best of the crop that was coming up. And so then we have this evolution of the maíz that we know today that started with the ancestral grass of teocinte, right? And so if we wanted to have a good vaso de esquimal, le dicen esquimal, ¿no? El elote, así.
Esquite.
Esquite, esquimal es la nieve. So si esa, si pues un vaso de elote, ¿verdad? Entonces un vaso de maíz. Y para comernos uno que tuviera puro teocinte, no, pues estuviéramos esperando todo el día o estuviera definitivamente más caro. But thankfully, these folks made these decisions back then. This artificial selection took place. It really led the way for looking at phenotypes and how characteristics are expressed. Right? We're talking about bioengineering. We're talking about a lot of different components that if we break down into it, there's validity there. The chemistry was in this process of what we call nixtamalization, right? And so before I even knew this whole lesson, the only time that I've seen this word was when my mom sent me to the store to go get una lata de jamani para el
Ajá.
pozole y decía 100% nixtamalizado. And I'm like, I don't know what that meant. Now I know what that means, right? It
Y yo,
was
like,
the process.
nomás me imagino cómo vas a ver el pozole.
Sí,
Vámonos.
sí, el pozole está bueno. No sé si haga mucha diferencia si es 100% o no es 100%. Pero sí es porque es 100%. Te voy a decir por qué. So in the process, this chemistry process of nixtamalization, they add an alkaline substance, right? Calcium hydroxide, cal, to the water. They boil it, and what it allows for it to do is that outside layer, the pericarp of the kernels of corn, fall off, and we don't have to deal with that later on. Now, for those of you who don't know what the pericarp is, picture going to the movies, you're enjoying your movie, I don't know, Mario Brothers, whatever it is that you're watching, and you get those little things in your teeth from the popcorn. It's
That's
just a
what
pericarp.
it is.
That's the pericarp. And so they figured this process out way back when. And then, ni se diga de la física, right? That you take the little bolita of dough and you put it in and you apply a force, and then now you've increased the surface area of this delectable treat that we're going to use, right? And give it its iconic shape. So, short story, right? The long story short, como dicen, right? There's, biology, chemistry, physics. The kids love it. The parents love it. It gives oftentimes our attendees the opportunity to interact. I can't tell you how many times I've had families say, "Oh, yo me acuerdo cuando hacía tortillas con mi abuela o con mi mamá." And now the newer generation is like, "Oh, they're so excited." And they're talking about they're going to go get a tortilla press at some point to make some at home. The point for me is connecting to the past, right? Learning that you come from a long line of folks that were wise before their years, right? Before we gave people PhDs, before everybody started to think that a scientist needed to be an old white man in a lab coat, and gives validity to these remedios that we hear about sometimes, gives validity to the lineage where you come from and the credibility, right? I mean, we have these pyramids, the mathematics, the you know the knowing the stars so well, all these amazing things, right? The natural dyes. And so I like to highlight a lot of those lessons, because again, it gives people a sense of strength, a sense of pride, right? Like, oh, okay, cool. Like okay, these are the things. And so that's one of the best lessons that I take a lot of pride in. I did, a lot of that also started with conversations with colleagues at different conferences, like SHIP or SACNAS, in which we start talking about basic things, right? And I think that's the first time I heard of a tortilla as a science thing, was for somebody from a college up north, but they were talking about flour tortillas. I think it was the Lutheran University or something. They talked about flour tortillas, and then that just kind of led me to think on my own journey about corn and so on and so forth. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But we've done similar things with the science of lowriders, right, and looking at hydraulics, hydraulic systems, the engineering, the physics that goes into that. And in the past, I've partnered together a mechanic with a physics instructor so that they can kind of relate to each other and learn from one another, and then teach. We've done natural dyes, looking at cochineal, which is the insect that has the symbiotic relationship with nopal, right? Which is where we get a lot of red dyes. So there's definitely a lot of different lessons that have been birthed from our culture.
It's awesome, fantastic. That's a great story. Great story. So you went to get a bachelor's, you got a master's, and all of a sudden you decide to go pursue a doctoral degree, right? And how and why did you decide to go to this doctoral degree when a lot of our people, a lot of our Latinos, they go to just get a bachelor's, and that's out of the 20% population that's currently in the US, only about 6% are actually in STEM. And of that 6%, only like 1%, 2%, if they pursue a doctoral degree or PhD of sorts. Why did Beto Vasquez say, ¿Sabes qué? I'm going to go get my doctor's degree with San Diego State?
Yeah, that was a whole interesting story. And you know what? And the way you make it sound, it is like if it was, bien facilito, right? Llegamos de un lado del otro. I know that's not what you meant, but I mentioned that because I think in that process of completing the bachelor's, getting the master's, there was a lot of doubt. There was
Yeah.
a lot of times I considered, hey, ya estuvo, ya, I got here. Maybe my kids can take it from here. There was a few times that I failed some classes. I think that's important to also mention because failure is part of the process sometimes, whether we like it or not, whether we can deal with that or not. It comes. And I mentioned those things to just, bring a normalizing, validating tone to things, right? It's okay. Things are gonna be tough. You'll figure things out, but you just gotta keep showing up. And I think what really made the difference for me, Lázaro, is I just kept showing up, even at points where I was doubtful that of what was gonna come. I kept showing up. The master's program, same thing. I wanted to teach community college biology. That's all I needed was a master's. I fought tooth and nail for that, and I still didn't make the GPA that I needed to get into that program. But because I me aferré, sigue adelante. I met people along the way that were willing to vouch for me.
Yeah.
That's kind of what helped me, be able to get into that master's program and finish that up. And so the struggle was real, man, in every component of that. The only reason I didn't go straight to a PhD in science, Lazaro, if I'm to be completely transparent with you, is because I doubted that I could do it.
Mm.
Because had I been smarter about it and being intentional and strategic about it, I should have gone for my PhD in science that I wouldn't have had to have paid for, because many people don't understand that if you go to a STEM related PhD program, oftentimes they're paying you to go into that program because you're conducting research for them. But I doubted myself. The imposter syndrome was very real for me. I had a family I was raising at the same time, so I didn't think that was what I needed to do at that point in time, right? I thought I needed to get. Remember, I started my career later on, so for me, I wanted to start building up retirement. I wanted to start making a livable wage so I can pay for my family everything that we needed. Because at that point, I always had two or three, part-time jobs, and I was going to school full time. So life was tough. The noise in my head was loud that told me that I didn't have what it took. Because had I been able to do it again, I probably would have gone straight into a PhD program from my bachelor's, because within the PhD program, in many of them, you can acquire your master's along the way as you go to complete the PhD. But don't pay so much attention to that doubt that lingers in your own head, because it can derail you, right? I ended up pursuing the doctoral degree in educational leadership with an emphasis on community colleges, because I wanted that for me. I owed it to myself. And given my background, I think I really thought it important for me to have a terminal degree that would give me validity at
Mhm.
many of the tables that I sat at, because as a formerly incarcerated individual, you run across folks that might dismiss what you have to say or your contribution to the team, because they want to continue to see you through a different lens. That hasn't been the case so much, but I've always wanted to make sure that I had, that I had something that would provide that validity. Even though my work record, even though my my connections and my reputation, speak for itself. I wanted to give that to myself, to give myself that validity. And now I have the opportunity to use that when I choose to use that, right? If I want to be Dr. Vasquez, I can be Dr. Vasquez. And if I'm talking to Lázaro or I'm talking to students, I'm just Beto, right? Because that's who I am.
Yeah.
But if I need to sign something for somebody, or I need to represent or advocate on something on behalf of something, then I'll be Dr. Vasquez. Like put my cape on and take it off, right?
Yeah.
I went educational leadership, because I think along this journey that I've been on, I see myself in more of an administrative capacity,
Mhm.
influencing change, as leadership. And I don't know if that means at some point I'll try to be, a vice president or something along those lines, or a president for a college. But I think for now, I just wanted to continue to be in the administrative capacity, kind of helping to shape. how we're designing programs, how we're running programs, but also being able to influence what that looks like, right? Because sometimes we have the best of intentions and well-meaning opportunities that come up, but the devil's in the detail, right? There's this nuance of if we run summer research programs, how do we make students feel welcome? How do we make them feel like they belong? How do we encourage them and teach them how not to pay attention to that loud doubt in their head? How do we connect them to professionals that can lead them to opportunities, right? Because we know that it's not always about what you know, it's who you know.
And who
And
knows you,
so, yeah,
right?
and using that social capital, leveraging that social capital however we can to create those opportunities for folks. So I think that's kind of how I steered that way. Besides that, the program that I did, and again, I'm sharing this because it was a learning process for me. I ended up doing what they call an EDD, which is an educational doctorate, but it's a 3-year program for working professionals, which meant that I only went to school one weekend a month, while I continued to work on my dissertation. Um, as you go on your journey, it's not just about are you good enough for a school, but is the school good enough for you,
Mm.
right? Meaning that you have to start thinking about what's the best fit for you. When I say what's the best college out there, people usually say que la Harvard, que la Yale, que el Stanford, que UCLA, Berkeley. Listen, the best college out there is going to be the one that's going to meet your needs right now the way you need them met, right? And that could be community college, that could be a 4-year school, whatever it is. It's the same thing once you receive yourself with your bachelor's and think about what's next for your graduate degree. Think about it the same, right? What's important to you that you start working? Can you be a full-time student again? All those things are good to consider as you decide what your next move is going to be.
Awesome. So now that you went through that doctoral degree and you're the director of EAOP at UCSD, that you advocate and you have the ability to adapt and to change and to make programs functional. What has your vision been as the director for UCSD EAOP program?
So currently, I will say that I have the privilege of being the director for two different programs, right? So one is the STEM outreach and community engagement for Create, which is an educational research center at UC San Diego, tasked with trying to address, you know, the inequities that we see in our neighborhoods in San Diego, in our communities in San Diego. And so within Create, live the STEM outreach program, but also EAOP, which is our student facing college prep program. For both programs right now, the mission continues to be able to meet students where they're at and their families, right? To educate families about, and the what's it called? Correct these myths, right? Myth bust, if you will, what thoughts are about financial aid or access to college or what that looks like. And it's so interesting, right? Because in Latino families, I meet with students and I said, hey, pretty soon les van a leer la cartilla, right? Les van a decir, o se van a la escuela o se van a trabajar, right? This is the parents talking to the kids in their families. And I get to work with these high school kids and I tell them, you think 4 years is going to be a long time? It runs really quick, right? It happens really fast. And you need to start preparing for what that's going to look like when you're done, right? And so our mission within EAOP, which by the way, EAOP is about, 50 years old. It's kind of like TRIO is federally,
Yeah.
but EAOP is for the UC schools. And I wanna share that because coming into the role, I've come to learn that a lot of people don't know what that is, right? So EAOP is the Early Academic Outreach Program, which is a college preparation program for high school students and now a little bit more middle school students to prepare them for life after high school, right? And each UC campus across the state has an EAOP program. And so it's a real honor to be able to lead the one here in San Diego because here in San Diego, it's not only San Diego, it's also the Imperial Valley. Between both areas there, I'll say both being San Diego and Imperial Valley, but really the San Diego one includes Central San Diego and all the way down to the border. So Sweetwater District, all that region. And so we work with thousands of students. But how do we continue the mission to do that is by, educating folks on about what the program is, two, how we can support you, and three, providing those opportunities for that support. And so, many of those opportunities might be on campus. We know that transportation can be a challenge at times. So, oftentimes, we try to meet the community where it's at, try to make sure we find ways, if it's an afternoon thing and we're inviting families, maybe provide a meal, right? Being realistic that, we're taking time that they would usually use for something else. So trying just to leverage that experience that I have both as a parent and as a first generation student to meet our communities where they're at with what their needs might be, and leverage resources however I can, whether it's the university or financially from our program to be able to make things happen.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We pass on to rapid fire, and this one's short answers, one or two sentences, not too
Sure.
long. Uh, Good leaders always create good leaders. Do you have any individuals you actually looked up to? Who are your mentors?
You said I had to be rapid, huh?
Yeah,
Y tengo varios. Tengo
you can
varios.
name them. You can name them and say, "Hey, thank you, so and so and so and so."
I would say one of the people that I look up to a lot is Augie Gallego.
Okay.
I think he was the first Latino chancellor for the San Diego Community College District. Real down to earth individual that has taught me that, again, reinforcing that I can be myself and be impactful in the work that I want to carry out. I'd say another person, uh, she's my current supervisor, Susan Yonezawa. Amazing individual, bright as you could ever imagine. I've learned so much from her professionally, but also personally in how you can have interactions, professional interactions with folks that provide opportunities for growth. I'd say another one earlier on was Denise Wisenhut, she is now the president of Fresno City College. She was one of my mentors when I first got to San Diego City College, and just very great person to interact with. Full of knowledge and just very patient with me. And there's definitely been many other folks along the way, maybe not in education. My compadre Luis Ontiveros from Car Connection, he's a master mechanic and a pastor, and just calls me out on my stuff. You gotta have mentors for different parts of your life. I think that's so important because you don't just always need yes people. You don't always just need people that are gonna just co-sign your stuff. You're gonna need people that bring you up on things, hold you accountable, push you when you need to be pushed. And I've been so fortunate to have such amazing mentors in my life that continue to inspire me and support me in different ways. Of course, there's many others. David, who I mentioned earlier. I always give him props because he's continuously showed me who he really is when he's in and out of office. And I think to me that means a lot because he is, when we talk about genuine and authentic, he is what you see is what you get, right? And so it's things like that. Mentors, maybe he might not be my official mentor, but he's one of those people that I also look to as an example for things that we want to do. Again, many other folks, don't have time to name them all, but I think those are some of the top ones that I can definitely touch on.
Awesome. Thank you, sir, for sharing that. That's great. What do you believe your superpower to be now that we're in the age of marble? What would you say your superpower is?
Híjole. I'm gonna go with Sherman Elementary's motto. It says that being bilingual is my superpower.
Awesome.
So being
Awesome.
bilingual is my superpower, both in Spanish and in English, but also in the ability to code switch when I need to connect different communities, put the different things together, and translate. From speaking institutional to translating it into something that the community can relate to and connect with.
Awesome. Thank you. Being bilingual. Is there any particular book, movie, or podcast that you believe has made an impact in your life and you wish more people would actually take advantage of?
A book in my life. Let's see.
Or movie?
Or a movie. Ooh, muchos movies. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. There's I don't know. I would say the Bible, man. I know
The
that sounds
Bible? Yeah.
a little different. Not trying to be cliche, man, but there's so many different opportunities for us to just kind of slow our roll and look at what really matters in life.
Yeah.
And I refrain from saying that because I don't read it as much as I should, right? But I think there's always in an age where we're so busy and always looking for the next thing. I think taking a moment to just be appreciative and grateful and move in the spirit of gratitude. I think that's always something very important. So, pick up that book once in a
Yeah.
while, right? I'm telling myself mostly, but pick up that book once in a while and just kind of slow the roll and really think about appreciating the people and the things that you have right now while you have them.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Um, at this moment, for Beto Vasquez, what is your definition of success?
I'd say at this point in my life, my definition of success would be confidently saying that I tried my best in something, right? Whether it's an exercise, whether it's something that I'm practicing, whether it's I'm trying to be a good father or a good husband or a good son, right? I think success just means that I can be honest with myself and saying I tried my best, right? And the circumstances might not always, the outcome might not always be exactly as we envision it, but I think I can be comfortable with, success being, hey, I made my best effort.
Giving it your best effort at that
Being
moment.
honest about being honest with yourself about saying I gave it my le eché ganas.
Le eché ganas. Le di todo lo que pude. Muy
Sí, sí,
bien.
porque en veces decimos que sí lo hicimos, pero no es cierto. We like to go easy on ourselves sometimes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
just being honest with yourself about, hey, you know what? Was that the best effort that you had? Because if it wasn't, then let's try that again.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. For this one, I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to, we're going to go back to that elementary school, to that stage, to that little Beto Vasquez that is being called up to the stage. He's 7 years old. He's walking to get his certificate of academic recognition. And he grabs it. He looks out at the audience and he doesn't see his family members, right? And he's coming off the stage, but all of a sudden, there's Beto Vasquez from the present. So if you open your eyes right now, can you share a couple pieces of advice, maybe two or three, with that young Beto Vasquez about what you can do for the future?
Yeah, that was like therapy right now, Lazaro. I don't know, it was gonna be a therapy session. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would well, first of all, I'd give him a real big hug, you know? Give him a real big hug and let him know that I'm really proud of him. Um, I would say I would tell him to que le eche ganas, y que no se me apachurre, and that his efforts will be recognized, you know? That's what I would say.
Yeah. Que le eche ganas and his efforts will be recognized. Thank you, sir. I want to acknowledge you for your authenticity, for your intentionality, for your support within our community, for your consistent effort of showing up and being present and keeping our community motivated by learning, by showing up, by sharing the culture, and making sure that they pursue science and STEM, and that education is a gateway to success. With that, I want to say thank you so much to our audience. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I definitely hope that you can share this and connect with Beto Vasquez, who is the current director at UCSD for the EAOP program. Go ahead and reach out to him, LinkedIn or email, and definitely ask him any questions. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego. Bye-bye.
Gracias.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Please feel free to reach out to Beto Vasquez with any questions. See you next time. Hasta luego. Bye-bye.